Don't you go clicking that thumbs down button? Oh no, you didn't. All right, so today, as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit about glottal stops in singing. Now, glottal stops are created by completely stopping the flow of air through the glottis at the glottal level. So by bringing the vocal folds together and abruptly stopping the air and thus the tone. Now, glottal stops refer specifically to the stopping of the air and the tone, not to any notes that may follow. In singing, you might hear glottal stops in something like whoa-oh-oh. Now, glottal stops differ from staccato in that staccato notes are, well, notes. They may be detached and brief in duration, but they do have onset, tone, and release elements, whereas glottal stops might be classified as just sort of a hard release of the tone. Glottal stops also differ from plosive consonants such as k, g, p, b, in that plosives, in the production of plosives, the airflow is completely obstructed and stopped somewhere higher up along the supraglottal vocal tract by the articulators. Now, the use of glottal stops is becoming increasingly prevalent in popular styles of singing. You might hear them at just the start of words beginning with vowels, or perhaps between two syllables when the second syllable begins with a vowel sound.
Smell will take me back to when I was young. How come I'm never able to identify where it's coming from? I'd make a candle out of it if I ever found it. Try to sell it, never sell out of it. I probably only sell one.
God as my witness, stop what I finished.
Or you may hear several glottal stops back to back, creating a sort of percussive effect that can be very artistically effective if performed well.
Should've known better. Oh, Ophelia.
Try everything. Try everything. Try everything.
There are a few keys to being able to perform glottal stops well and safely. To effectively produce a glottal stop, you need to be able to close the glottis just firmly enough to stop the sound while simultaneously holding back the airflow down lower with the support musculature. And if you keep squeezing the abdominal girdle and generating really high subglottal pressures, it's going to be harder, if not impossible, to bring the vocal folds together in a balanced manner. It's almost like attempting to close the front door against hurricane force winds. And the notes that follow those glottal stops will then probably be explosive and harsh and grunt-like, almost like you're being punched in the gut repeatedly. Ugh, ugh, ugh. It's not going to sound very pretty. So I want to explore just briefly this opening and closing of the glottis. I want you to become sort of familiar with that action, that coordination. So first of all, I'm going to demonstrate this, but you're not going to be able to hear it because my mic is not going to be able to pick up on it. So what I'm going to do is just rapidly open and close my glottis by bringing the vocal folds together and apart, together and apart. I don't know if you can hear that, but it produces a little bit of a clicking sound. You should be able to hear it in your own head when you're doing it yourself. Now we're going to add a little bit of exiting airflow to this, and my mic should be able to pick up on this sound now. So I'm just rapidly opening and closing the glottis as I'm creating a little bit of subglottal pressure, and that's creating that sound of air sort of being puffed out in little spurts. And that's the precision that you need in order to be able to open and close the glottis and get a clean and artistically effective glottal stop. Now, if the vocal folds are not completely approximating, so they're not coming completely together, then you'll not only get an airy sound, but you won't be able to produce a true glottal stop. You'll need to work on both your glottal adduction, that is closing the glottis, bringing the vocal folds together, and breath management. Fortunately for you, working on glottal stops and things like staccato will help. If you're unable to quickly and precisely draw the vocal folds apart immediately after stopping the airflow, or there's a little bit of a sluggishness or gripping at the glottal level as you initiate the next tone again, then you're not going to be able to produce several glottal stops in rapid succession. You won't get that sort of percussive effect that you might be aiming for. The notes that follow will also tend to be a little bit harsh, and you'll need to work on your glottal abduction, opening the glottis or releasing some of the compression at the glottal level, and your breath management. So I'll get back to correcting these imbalances momentarily. So now that you've explored this rapid opening and closing of the glottis a little bit, let's introduce phonation, voice. Now we're gonna say uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. You hear how precise that glottal stop between the two syllables is? Now try saying uh-oh repeatedly, but gradually energize it a bit more and more so that it's a little bit louder than your normal speaking volume. We typically sing with more intensity or loudness than we use in speech. Uh-oh, 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 uh-oh. Now let's try speaking several times in a row. Hear how precise that glottal closure is? And yet there's not that gripping kind of sound afterwards, and I'm able to move immediately into the next vowel sound without any kind of pressed or squeezed sort of sound. Now you may notice also that your epigastrium bounces. The epigastrium is the area between the bottom of the sternum and the belly button. Now it may bounce a little bit. I think it's hard for me to demonstrate that. Every time you stop the tone, this area stops moving and it releases and relaxes a little bit. And then every time you initiate the tone again, it tenses and moves in a little bit. And this is completely normal. We see this also in staccato singing. If you're hearing a gripping sound or it feels like things are kind of gripping in here, the notes don't end very precisely or are grunt-like, almost like you're in a football huddle, then your glottal closure mechanism is behaving hyperfunctionally. In that case, you need to make sure that you're decreasing your subglottal pressures at the moment when the vocal folds start to come together to stop the tone. Now, if you don't stop pushing or squeezing with the breathing muscles, in particular the abdominal musculature, the glottis has to work extra hard to make that glottal stop happen. And the higher the subglottal pressures, the firmer the glottal compression, the stronger the glottal resistance efforts. So this is how the coordination goes. You're phonating and maintaining a certain level of subglottal pressure for the intensity with which you're singing. And then as you bring the vocal folds together, you stop squeezing and generating subglottal pressure. If you have a hyperfunctional or pressed glottal closure and you're getting that gripping or grunting or the note that follows is explosive and harsh, then you can try singing several notes in succession with glottal stops between them, so you're stopping the tone with a glottal stop, and every time you stop that tone, you're going to take a tiny inhale, and this will help to open up the vocal tract and prevent that cycle of gripping. It's probably hard to tell, but I'm opening up the vocal tract every time I stop the tone. I open it again with an inhale, and then I initiate the tone, stop, open with an inhale, initiate the tone, and stop. You can also try getting some sideways expansion as you stop the tone, and this will keep the subglottal pressures lower. I maintain a little bit of sideways expansion with my lower ribs throughout most of my vocal phrases, and this helps me to maintain reasonable levels of subglottal pressure for the singing task. Even when I'm singing at high intensities and working on my belting, I still try to maintain just a little bit of that sideways expansion of my lower ribs in order to help control those pressures. One more little trick would be to sing ingressively, that is on the inhale. Now it's going to sound terrible, but it will release the glottal mechanism because it keeps the vocal tract in this nice open inhale posture that you can eventually transfer to singing egressively, that is on the exhale, like we normally sing. It's a little hard to do because you're using a different part of the vocal folds. You're bringing that part together first. But it's a really good practice because things can't shut down. They can't become too hyperfunctional when you're singing ingressively. You can also try a little bit of glottal fry, vocal fry, to help retrain those glottal adductors to operate in a more balanced manner. Sounds terrible, but what you can do is you can eventually reduce the amount of vocal fry in the sound until you get a nice, clean, clear, precise sound. And hopefully that will give you some more balance. So I hope you really enjoyed this video and got a lot out of it. Please let me know what you think in the comment section below. Click the thumbs up button. Oh yes, you should. And subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. In the meantime, Poppy is gonna take us out and she's gonna show us how it's done.